Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Lacey Dunn. She's on for the first time. And so if you're not familiar with her, she is a functional medicine dietitian. She has her master's in nutrition and dietetics internship from Texas. Is that Texas Women's University?
Yes, CWU.
And interesting. I've never heard of that. That's awesome. We'll have to talk about that in a minute. So she's also host of the Uplift Fit Nutrition podcast and author of the Woman's Guide to Hormonal Harmony. So Lacey, thank you for coming on today. Looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited for this conversation. And I'm on the other side of the podcast. So it's really interesting and it's going to be fun conversation today.
Yeah, I've been a podcast or a guest on a few podcasts and definitely is different, being if you're always kind of being the one that is interviewing people, it's always a little bit different being on the other side, but I always find it to be fun to be able to be the one to just kind of talk about, something you're super passionate about. So looking forward to that. So where is Texas Women's University at?
Houston, Texas. Yep.
Houston.
It's
Awesome. Cool.
actually not just for women. So it's men and women. Fun fact.
Interesting. Was it like did it used to just be women's or something at some point, or that's just the name
I
that
should know that, but honestly, I don't even know.
I love it. Cool. Well, again, looking forward to chatting with you. So, what I wanted to do, today, just to give people a little bit of a background on you, is just maybe your story and like also kind of maybe tie in how you got into like functional medicine and maybe like a brief overview of like what that is and why it's important to you.
Yeah, of course. So I'll give everybody a brief backstory because I know sometimes when I listen to podcasts, people are like, I don't give a crap about who you are, your background. Just give me the good knowledge. So I'll do a good recap real fast. So I am a functional medicine dietitian right now out of Jacksonville, Florida. I went to UGA and I was in dietetics and I was obsessed with bodybuilding at that time. So that was when I wasn't in the functional medicine world, I was going into clinical nutrition, cancer research, absolutely obsessed with it all. And then I went to Texas Women's University and I started doing my master's degree in my dietetic internship. At the same, I was doing full-time online training to try and pay for my master's degree. And I was also still doing bodybuilding and prepping. And let's be real, I was grinding myself into the ground. And I didn't realize it at the time. I just thought I was tired, right? I was just being a student and just doing the best that I could. Well, I finally entered into one of my favorite classes, my micronutrient classes, and we were talking about iodine and iron and vitamin D and all the different micronutrients. And I'm kind of a nerd. So I was like, you know what? Let me do some further investigation on these nutrients and how they play a role with the thyroid health, because that's what one of my professors had recommended to learn more about. So I started reading Aviva Rom's Adrenal Thyroid Revolution. And if you have not read this book, it's phenomenal. As I started reading this book, I was like, holy mother of God, this is literally me. It was talking about hair loss, loss of your eyebrow hair, chronic fatigue, random weight gain, dry skin, acne, puffiness to the body, and chronic fatigue, insomnia. And I was like, wow, this sounds like me. I was like, am I just a student or is this me? And so I was like, you know what? Let me ask my doctor for a thyroid panel. He would only pull a TSH. And as I had read the book and done research, that's only a pituitary marker, right? Doesn't tell us what's actually going on with your thyroid, your free T4, free T3. And then there's more to that. So we could talk about that later with cellular hypothyroidism. But so I pulled my own thyroid level labs and lo and behold, he told me my TSH was normal. So I was normal, but I was hypothyroid, significantly hypothyroid. And at that point, he put me on thyroid medication. We upped the dose. Could never even bring my thyroid levels up. So I knew something was up. I was not responding to thyroid medication. I actually was gaining more weight. And all the years that I did in bodybuilding did not show. Like I was a puffy, inflamed mess. And so I was like, you know what? There is more to this story. So that's when I dove into and investigated into the further aspects of what contributes to thyroid health. So I was diving into the adrenals, cortisol, gut health, toxins, hormones, and I became utterly obsessed. And then through that, I was able to figure out, and then doing a Dutch test, doing a gut test, that for me at that time, I truly had hypothyroidism because of adrenal burnout. I had significantly high cortisol that had pushed me into a suppressed thyroid state. So I was able to heal myself, bring myself back up to normal. Of course, I couldn't stop doing my master's degree, doing my internship and working for it, but I was able to heal my adrenals by doing less training and eating more actually. So that's when it all started. And then from there, I became utterly obsessed with everything functional medicine. So that's when I dove into learning more about GI map testing, the adrenals, the Dutch, heavy metals, mold, you name it. And then it took to 2020 with COVID, where that's when I was kind of like really starting to write my book, The Women's Guide to Hormonal Harmony. And of course, again, I was super stressed and I know about functional medicine, right? But I just thought, you know what? COVID's happening. I'm walking less. I'm working out less because everything's closed. I'm just inflamed. I'm tired because I'm writing a book and working full time. Well, lo and behold, and I didn't even recognize it at the time, I started rapidly losing weight. And I didn't recognize it until I went to my sister's wedding. I flew over to Atlanta and my mom was like, Lacey, you don't look too good. Like, you look like you've lost a significant amount of weight. And I was like, really? Because I didn't have a scale. I wasn't able to do anything. And I just thought I was, like, just getting through my day a little bit stressed. And so I kind of like started realizing, you know what? I really am feeling like crap. So the first thing that I did was I investigated and I did GMAP, rechecked my thyroid, rechecked my cortisol with the Dutch. And then I actually also went ahead and did a mold test because I knew that there had been previously like a moldy smell in my apartment that I had cleaned out. And lo and behold, way more than that actually happened. Not only did I have mold toxicity, I actually ended up having candida, H. pylori, SIBO, leaky gut, and a jaw cavitation. I actually had gone to the dentist because I had a tiny little bit of a pain in the back of my molar, and I thought that was just kind of like maybe fractured a tooth. But lo and behold, I had a jaw cavitation, which is basically bone that has been decomposed and has bacteria in it. So I had to go get that removed surgically. And then I had to treat my mold toxicity, the candida, the H. pylori, all of that. Had to move out of the apartment, moved from Houston all the way over to Charleston. And it was a whirlwind of disaster. I lost like 20 pounds and I looked like a cancer patient and it was terrible. And I think of all this, like I knew at the time how to heal these things, but I did not know what it was like to actually go through those things previously when I was working with clients. Like I knew how to treat them, but I never actually went through that myself. So it really sucked. But honestly, like it's such a blessing because not only did it push me closer to God and deepen my faith, but it really helped me better be empathetic and understand what people have to go through. Because now I can honestly say to each one of my patients, like, hey, I actually know what you're going through. I've been there. I can help you. I can encourage you versus like just get your shit together, right? I've been there. I've done that. So I'm completely obsessed with functional medicine. I'm always constantly learning. Even if I think I know the material, I'm always constantly learning. And I would say functional medicine is what all medicine should be. It's the root cause approach to medicine. It's addressing the person, their history, their past, and the root cause of their disease and the root cause of their symptoms.
Awesome. Yeah, really appreciate you sharing that. So it kind of sounds like it was something where, again, you were. I feel like this is pretty typical, right? Where it's like you're, maybe like you said, you're in bodybuilding, you had a lot of stuff going on, and so maybe were not eating enough, overtraining, things like that. Plus, you had all this other stress going on, and so it's like you feel like you're doing the right things, but that just pushing harder wasn't necessarily what you needed to do there. But then you obviously got that figured out, but then you had another kind of issue as well. So kind of gave you another deeper understanding of everything. And so I think probably the takeaway there is like, hey, you go through it once, it's probably not good. It could come up again at some point as well too. And just kind of always learning how to manage that's going to be key. So what do you feel like were some of the kind of key things for yourself there to kind of get through that period of time? Like, I guess from like a training, maybe lifestyle, nutrition standpoint.
Ooh, from which? Because they were completely different types of adjustments
We'll
there.
we'll start with the first one, and then
Okay.
we can dive into the second
Okay.
aspect of it.
So the first one was definitely just straight up hypothyroidism, high cortisol. And really what I needed to do was decrease my training load significantly. So I went from training actually like 6 days a week to training 4 times a week, 75% max intensity versus my all out bodybuilding. And then I actually really had to implement a lot of like adaptogens and parasympathetic work to really retrain my body and retrain my parasympathetic nervous system to say, hey, I'm in a safe space. So way less training. Then I upped my food. I actually had to change up my normal macronutrient ratios because I had become insulin resistant. So previously I could eat at that time before that happened, like 300 carbs a day, not gain anything. But I had to change the ratios because I had become so insulin resistant from having high cortisol and hypothyroidism. So I had to change up and change the ratios, increase my fats, decrease my carbs. And then I had to do a lot of walking to prevent that future weight gain because my metabolism had been so suppressed. So a lot of my exercise at that time went from heavy training to just simply walking, relaxing. And then I did a lot of detoxification work at that time too, because there was just a lot of things I didn't know about that I was exposed to, like plastics, BPA, endocrine disrupting chemicals, all that. So I did, those are the main things that I did at that time. And then my favorite adaptogens I did during that time were also ashwagandha, cordyceps, and phosphatidylserine, CBD as well. So those are the top things that I did. It wasn't aggressive at all during that time.
What was the kind of time frame on that, and like how long did it take for you to kind of get back to, I guess, yeah, normal and whatnot there?
3 months. Yeah.
3.
Three
Okay.
months of changing it up.
Yeah. I feel like that's probably a pretty short period of time compared to maybe what some people have to do there with that. And then so that was more so like you were working hard, again, not seeing a change. It sounded like you said you kind of had like this like more inflamed kind of look, puffy look, I think. And then the second time around, that was more like weight loss issue and you couldn't really pinpoint what was going on initially with that.
Mhm. Yep.
So yeah, so what did that kind of look like for you there with that?
Ooh, that's a very big open book. So it was a lot. I had to move out of my apartment, moved into with my parents, and I had to clean like absolutely everything. So whenever you have mold toxicity, there's remediation, and then you have to get rid of it in your body too. And so there was a lot of work that I had to do, supporting my mitochondria, supporting all my organs, especially like my kidney and my liver, because mold is damaging to those organs. And then I had to do a lot of work with binding and then the gut. Oh my gosh, there was so much that I had to do. Like I was probably taking like 30 pills, like 30 different supplements on a daily basis because not only did I have to get rid of like candida, H. pylori, SIBO, but I also had to do the mold work and I ended up having to do parasite work too because I wasn't able to get rid of the yeast or get rid of the mold at all until I actually got rid of apparently the parasites that I also had. So it was a combination of a lot of that work, plus, of course, supporting my adrenals and my mitochondria and detoxification all in one together. But at the same time, like, I wouldn't have had it any other way because by working on all those systems together, I was able to best support myself in feeling good as soon as possible.
What was the recovery timeline on that?
Really long.
Yeah,
It was about a year and a half.
yeah. I
And it
figured
took me 2 years to build back the muscle that I had lost.
I figured that one was probably gonna be a little bit longer. What was your, like, training and nutrition like during that time?
I would say the first year from losing the weight, training, I attempted to train like 4 times a week, maybe up to 5 if I felt like it, but I had to keep it like 50% max intensity. And then when I got to the year mark, that's when I was able to go back into the gym with normal intensity 5 times a week. But it really took me like I felt like trash for that entire year, even though I was working on my body. Like it took me a full year to be able to get back to normal.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's, for people to enjoy working out a year, that sounds, that's an eternity to not be doing something that you enjoy, right? Especially, you came from a bodybuilding background, so I'd imagine that training's super important to you, and obviously you work in this field, so I can imagine training super important to you there. So, what does your training and nutrition look like now? Is it, what are you focused on? What does that kind of look like at this point?
And balls to the wall going for weight gain
I
and
love it.
training hard and training heavy right now. So I've worked my way up to having like I really push for high carb, high protein, and then I keep it like a moderate fat. So typically right now I'm eating close to like 2,600 and that's my current maintenance calories. So in pushing calories past that, that would be muscle gain. I'm at a great place right now to where I've kind of like bypassed that like the I didn't some people, they take a break from training and then they were able to have muscle memory. Did not happen for me. So I've finally been able to grow that muscle back. So now I'm in that surplus type of state to where I'm trying to aim to continue to grow just for myself though. And then weight training, I'm right now doing 5 to 6 times a week. I really have to listen to my body because the body keeps the score. So if anybody has gone through a period of adrenal stress or hypothyroidism, your body remembers that. So if you go through these periods of training more, exercising more, or having higher stressful periods of your life, the first thing that your body's going to want to do is it remembers that. So it's going to have a shutdown. There's the vagal theory that's like a dorsal vagal shutdown. So the body kind of remembers that. So when I start overtraining a little bit too much, or I'm overextending myself, maybe with relationships or friendships, or just doing too much, my body will tell me. I'll start noticing that I'm retaining water, have insomnia, having joint pain, muscle aches, maybe being puffy again. And so I gotta completely cut it back and really focus on more parasympathetic work.
Yeah, focus more on the recovery side of things, and again, not just push it even more. So, like, for
Yep.
you, a couple things on that. So, like, you kinda mentioned, like, if you go through, like, hypothyroidism at some point, it's like your body always kinda remembers that. So, like, for you, if you wanna get into, like, a deficit and lose body fat in the future, I don't know if that's something that you're gonna wanna do at some point again.
Mhm.
How will that look for you? Is it, again, just you paying attention to, like, things outside of like, your lifestyle, parasympathetic, stuff like that? Or, yeah, what would that look like for you?
So for me in particular, I know my body responds very well to just adding steps or making like a baby 5 grams of fat dip. Like the less that I do, the less of a deficit I put myself in, the more my body responds. If I do any aggressive work, then it absolutely shuts down. It's like, nope, I don't like this. So I do this with my clients too. I try and give them as much food as possible and as little cardio as possible. That way we can preserve the metabolism, preserve the adrenals, preserve the hormones, because that's like your health is your wealth. So we want to focus on that first and foremost, versus the physique changes.
No, I love that. Yeah, instead of just throwing the kitchen sink at them,
Mhm,
kind of ease into it. But most people, that's their approach, right? They want to lose weight or lose body fat. And it's like, all right, let's do everything we can, and
mhm.
that's like you said, that's where people are going to get themselves into trouble. And then it sounds like if you have some history of that, maybe you've had hypothyroidism, like that's going to potentially, it could slow down even more because you kind of have that experience there. But probably individual, I would imagine. So as far as training goes, you said you train about 5 to 6 days a week. Is that like hypertrophy style? Do you have like a particular style that you like that's different from that, or what does that look like for you?
Full on hypertrophy style. Yeah. So I'm playing around with some of the things that John Meadows, I absolutely loved John Meadows. Power to him. But I use some of his intensity techniques. And that's the way I like to train, with really good intensity, but also focusing on the mind muscle connection as much as possible. And I definitely do have a higher volume type of training. That's just how I love it. That's how I respond to it. I'm like an ADD bunny in the gym, but that would be my training method. And then I'm a big fan of doing like the brain and bro split. So legs, backs and buys, shoulders, chest and tries. And that's how I like to implement it. And then I know my key weaknesses. So when it comes to my weaknesses, I add a little bit more of that volume on the other days. So like for me right now, shoulders, right? That's something that I want to bring up. So I'll add extra shoulders to either the leg day or the back and buys day.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear, how people train. John Meadows is awesome, and his stuff's great. And I think he passed away like what couple years, like 1 to 2 years ago, right? Yeah.
2 years ago. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, he's awesome, and he'll he's a legend in the field, so his stuff will continue to be out there for people. What about cardio? What does that look like for you? Like,
Just
or do you
steps
do
right
any
now.
steps?
Yeah, no, I don't do any cardio. It's funny, people invite me to do marathons, and I'm like, "Do you? Are we even friends?" Like, I'm not doing it. I've worked so hard to build this muscle back. I'm never touching cardio.
I love it. It is, muscle is tough to come by, right? And I think a lot of, women in particular, I mean, even guys are guilty of this, but I do think they kind of neglect the importance of building muscle and how important it is to get that, and just how hard it is too, right? I think a lot of times people, they think it's easy to get, and there's people that have to work super hard to get it, and so I think basically what I'm trying to say there is don't take it for granted, right? And so that kind of sounds like what it is like for you right now as well too.
Yeah, and also I know my body, so if you have a past history of adrenal issues and hypothyroidism, that intense cardio is very hard on your adrenal glands, especially if you're doing HIIT. So for me, the less that I do of that, the less likely I'm going to further tax my adrenals and get them back to where they were.
You find that because of that history that you've had there with that, do you think that makes it maybe a little bit tougher to build more muscle, or to, yeah, just to add more muscle over time? Or do you think that, yeah,
Big time, because essentially my body, it remembers the stresses. So the first thing it wants to do is it wants to go high cortisol catabolic state, right? So when you're stressed, it doesn't matter if that's coming from just training. That can be stress that's coming from, the people in your life. And I do notice, and I go through periods, like I can tell to where I actually will become catabolic and I'll start losing a little bit of muscle mass without even changing my diet or my exercise training. So that's when it's very important for people to like be mindful of that and to listen to their bodies, because you can be doing all the good things with your diet and your exercise training, but your body will go into a catabolic state if you're super stressed.
and what are like some of those like signs for you that it's going in that state?
For me, definitely first, I will have a lot of acne and my skin will erupt. And I will notice that I have chronic fatigue, insomnia, afternoon energy crashes. I call it the I feel like I got hit by a truck when I wake up in the morning type of feeling. I will have delayed onset muscle soreness that surpasses my typical like day after. So it'll be a couple days after. And then I develop these weird like joint pain and muscle ache types of issues. So those are the top things. And then I also have a little bit of like a puffiness to me, a water retention type of thing. When you have like too much salt, too much sodium, and you kind of like feel like you can't see all the veins, can't see all the muscles. That's exactly what I see. And I'm very in tune with my body. So I strategically know when I see that, then I'm walking into a little bit of high cortisol there. And then,
And
of course, bloat. That's a big thing that I see with myself and my clients. I'll have a lot of bloat that I typically don't.
yeah, all super interesting. So it sounds like at that point, once you get there, it's like you said, more parasympathetic work. So if that's backing off training, maybe like implementing a
Mhm.
deload or something like that. But that's kind of how you'll manage that. Cool. Was there anything else with your training or nutrition that you felt like was important to share with the audience before we kind of dive into the main topic?
I would say the important thing with nutrition for me was figuring out things that I could consume without making me further gassy and bloated that like gave me as much nutrition as possible. Because as a bodybuilder, a lot of people you eat the same thing every day. So I had to really fixate on like switching things up and getting as much variety, especially with plants to feed my gut microbiome to prevent leaky gut, which induces hypothyroidism. So that was the main thing that I really had to focus on was variety.
Yeah, so a couple things. So I just had Sam Miller on yesterday actually, and we kind of talked about gut. So I think this will be kind of a good, good tie-in, and you can go back and watch Sam's episode. But I watched your video from the Real Coaches Summit, and I know that you kind of talked about hormones, and like you mentioned, the big thing there is the gut and how that can be like a good, just kind of first thing to work on there to like lower inflammation levels and things like that. So I like that tip because, like you said, people if you are kind of aesthetic focused, I feel like you do end up eating the same types of foods. And maybe it's like you said, finding foods that don't further make your gut worse, but also like finding as much nutrient density foods as you can. But sometimes those foods, too many of those foods and certain ones can, make it worse as well too. So it's kind of a vicious cycle potentially there with it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's dive into the topic. And we've kind of been hitting on it. We've been talking about hormones. So I wanted to kind of tie this in. Like you said, you have this, you're a registered dietitian, you work done functional medicine, but you also have gone through this kind of issue yourself, right? Like you've had the hypothyroidism and then the gut issues. And so I think those are all, having that experience, I think is key. Like you said, you're able to relate to your clients much better. So you had a post on Instagram, and I think this is a good tie into this, and a good kind of way to start this though, is like, you said hormones are not the issue. You said like, hey, unpopular opinion, hormones are not the issue. And I'd love for you to maybe expand on that just a little bit and give the audience, kind of what you meant by that there with, again, hormones aren't the issue.
Yeah, that got a lot of a lot of people moving and grooving. So when our hormones go off, whether we are a male and we have low testosterone or female, and we might notice, we have estrogen dominance, low progesterone, hypothyroidism, any type of hormone. So we have our adrenal hormones, our thyroid hormones, our sex hormones. The hormones are responding to the internal or the external environment. So whenever our hormones go off, maybe we have a missed period, we have completely like late period, mid cycle spotting for women, painful, heavy periods, that's our body going having a fire alarm saying, "Hey, something is wrong." So, yes, we want to address why our hormones are off. I mean, we wanna address the hormones themselves, but the why the hormones are off is a completely different story. So, that's coming from a root cause. The hormones aren't the root cause, they are the fire alarm for your body saying, "Hey, there's something wrong," and the body's doing what it should. It's saying, "This is not a safe space in order for me to have a child and have a baby," and it's trying to get you to listen. Same when it comes down to chronic fatigue in general. Like the body doesn't hate you. It actually just wants you to slow down and remove those stressors. It's trying to preserve you. So the key things to look at really, I mean, it's hard because it could be any potential or internal or external type of stressor. But the thing is questioning what what impacts how our hormones work and how they're created and how they're detoxified. So the things I jump into whenever somebody has hormone issues from women, it's mostly period issues is what does your diet look like? What's your gut like? What's your toxic bucket like? What's your stress and your adrenal status? Those are the top four things that I start with. And a lot of people get in the weeds of, oh, my hormones are off. I have a painful, heavy period. I'm having fertility issues. Let me just do a Dutch test. And I love the Dutch test. Do not get me wrong. But if you just treat your hormones or think you're going to throw, Vitex or calcium D-glucarate or anything like that on your hormones, you're not addressing the root cause. And you're going to continuously probably have some issues. You've got to address, am I nutrient deficient? Do I have a gut imbalance like Candida or H. pylori or a parasite? Is it my toxic bucket? Do I have poor liver detoxification? Because unless you address those things, you're going to continuously be a hamster on a hamster wheel, not feeling your very best.
Yeah, and this is, so a lot of good things to pull out there. First, I love that you kind of brought that up of like, the hormones are, like you said, it's more of a fire alarm. It's like, hey, something's going on. And I feel like a lot of times people, like you said, when their hormones are off, it's like, oh, my body hates me. It's my body. But what they don't realize it is the things that they're doing. But I wonder if it's just maybe like a cop out or like, maybe like, hey, it's because of this. And then maybe it takes the blame away from, them, not necessarily the blame, but like, again, it takes some of the responsibility away from them on that. So that's why I wanted to go over that first, because I think that's super important for people to realize is that it is just, your body adapting to what you've been doing to it. And I think that's super important. So you kind of hit on this a little bit, but what would be some what are like the most common like signs and symptoms of hormonal balances that you see? And you kind of hit on a few of them there, but I'm just curious if there are any that's like, hey, this is what I see most of the time, or anything like that.
So I could put them into categories, definitely. But typically, I see things like, painful, heavy periods or missed periods, skip periods, acne, hair under your chin, hair loss around your temple, chronic fatigue, insomnia, sleep issues, afternoon energy crashes, low libido, hot flashes, night sweats, muscle weakness or muscle loss, dizziness, digestive issues, gas and bloating is very common. I see a lot of significant brain fog and poor wound healing. And then sometimes people, they have a lot of like OCD, ADHD, ADD type of behaviors pop up with anxiety or depression sometimes.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, basically a lot of different things there,
A
but those
lot.
those are going to be the most common ones that you'll see. And so, like, is there any what if somebody like goes and gets they have these things, they go to a doctor, they get diagnosed. Is there anything that like they could potentially like they have those like what would be the most like common like diagnosis that you see from like a doctor or something like that when they show up with these issues?
Typically, I see hypothyroidism, high cortisol, which is not going to be diagnosed by a doctor because they are never going to actually pull a good cortisol panel. But I see estrogen dominance, hypothyroidism, adrenal imbalances, typically high cortisol, low progesterone, and then I see a lot of high testosterone as well, which is more of the androgen-based PCOS. So I would say PCOS is the most common thing that I see, but PCOS is an umbrella diagnosis. So that then has additional root causes and types that can influence what actually is going on in your body.
Well, yeah, like you said, it's just again finding this root cause. So like what are and again, I think you kind of hit on this a little bit initially, but like okay, so people have these symptoms, those are the most common. Here's probably the most common diagnosis that you'll get from that. What are again, people that probably that are like again into fitness, they've been doing it for a while, they're trying to, improve how they look. What are some of the like most common reasons you see some of these pop up?
Most common causes of all these issues:
Mhm.
nutrient deficiencies, eating like crap, chronic stress, not sleeping well, poor liver detoxification, endocrine disrupting chemicals.
Okay.
I think a lot of people, they look from within, but they forget externally. So you could do all the within work, but if you have like not high quality water, you don't have a good water filter, and then you're consuming a lot of like heavy metals or toxins in your water, talk about like BPA, plastics, fragrances, all that stuff. That includes what you put on your skin, what you clean with, all that disrupts your hormones. There's endocrine disrupting chemicals that disrupt your hormones. So I think that's one of the things that a lot of people forget about.
Yeah, overlook that aspect of it again. It's
And the
like you
gut's
said.
big. The gut's big. As you mentioned, if you don't have a healthy gut, you're not going to have a healthy body. 60 to 70%, they say even up to 80% of your immune system is within your gut. So if there's some shape or form of gut imbalance, that's going to manifest into our hormonal balance. And time again, I see most of the time hormone issues stem from stress and the gut. Those are the top two things, and they typically are together.
With stress, I feel like it's an interesting one, right? Like, I think people think stress is just like, "Oh, hey, I have something going on." But, like, what do you kinda define stress as? Like, we say you're stressed, like, what do you, like, kinda see there? Is it like, again, is it just like, "Hey, I'm stressed because of work," or do you find that there's other aspects of stress too that can cause, higher stress levels?
So that's hard because stress can be real or perceived. And a stressor, you don't technically have to feel it to actually be stressed out. There can also be subconscious stressors that can hold you back, or stressors from trauma from your childhood that you've never worked on as well. Suppressed trauma is a big thing. So I like to look at the bucket effect, and I tell people, write down a list of your energy drainers and your energy fillers. And you want to look at anything that adds to your life or takes away from your life. And the key thing is, even though you do not feel stressed, you can still be stressed out. So I like to really focus on, okay, figuring out all those types of stressors in your day-to-day life. And things like not drinking water throughout the day. That's an easy thing that's a stressor to your body, right?
Yep. Yeah. Being dehydrated again, super easy. But again, it's like, oh, hey, let's, I got to take this supplement or whatever it may be. But it's like something, just as simple as, like you said, just drinking more water can be super helpful there. So, like, I guess you mentioned micronutrient deficiencies as well too. Are there any kind of common ones that you see there, or any that are, maybe the most like overlooked ones in that regard?
Well, definitely vitamin D and magnesium are the top 2 that I see, and then B vitamins. So vitamin D, magnesium, B vitamins, and then I see a lot of people have a deficiency. I'm gonna throw it out as fiber, so they're not getting enough fiber. And if you don't have enough fiber, 1, you're not feeding your microbiome, 2, you're not detoxifying correctly. So those are the top things that I see. And then if we're also talking maybe additional ones, omega-3 fats, a lot of people have a lot of, those processed vegetable oils high in those omega-6s, and there could be an omega-3, omega-6 imbalance, which induces inflammation. So that would be another one that I see as well. And then just lack of variety in your nutrients. And just because you eat food and you eat your nutrients doesn't mean you're absorbing them either. So that's something to keep in mind. A lot of people, they think that they have enough nutrients because they're eating a high quality diet or they're taking a supplement, but you can actually take something and not be actually absorbing it.
Right, and then that's probably gonna come back to, like, gut health, right? Is improving that,
Big time.
because like you said, you could be again, you might be doing something like B vitamins, but then you're not absorbing it, and then obviously
Mhm.
that's gonna be an issue there. What about iron? Is that something that you typically see as an issue or
That's actually a great question. I don't actually see too much low iron. A lot of people think they're low in iron, but the key thing is when I see iron deficiencies, I actually see more of a vitamin A or copper deficiency.
interesting?
I see a good amount of iron, but and if unless you're vegan, you're vegetarian, or you have painful heavy periods, actually it's those other nutrients that I see as the issue. The
Yeah, it's
iron
good.
definitely to check.
Yeah, right. Well, and just because I think with iron, you do wanna be careful with iron and making sure you're not overdoing iron as well too. So, making sure you do actually have, like, a deficiency there, and like you said, it comes down as probably other nutrients that are off. So, with all these things, again, you have some hormonal imbalances, you have some of these signs and symptoms. How is this going to impact, like, a body transformation, right? So, again, you're somebody that, hey, you're pushing super hard, you just keep pushing, things aren't happening. How's this gonna impact fat loss, muscle gain, things like that?
Depending on what's going on in the body, but mostly I would say people become insulin resistant. So then they're not able to use carbohydrates for fuel and they're more rapidly prone to not actually use them, but actually store them. So fat gain can occur or the inability to lose fat. And then if you are estrogen dominant or you have hypothyroidism or even low testosterone, you're going to potentially see suppression in your resting metabolic rate. And so the amount of calories that you eat on a daily basis is going to go low. And then you're going to have to continue to dig, drop down your calories. And then people grind themselves into the ground. Then you develop adrenal issues, further resistant to weight loss, further insulin resistance, and it just becomes like a vicious cycle. I do see a lot of people have weight loss issues with that. And then a lot of issues when it comes down to actually like reverse dieting. So some people will think, and I know the trend of like, okay, you're not losing weight, so let me reverse diet. Well, you can't reverse diet if you're insulin resistant and your hormones are off because your body's going to be predisposed to go into that quote unquote like storage mode too. So it becomes very frustrating for people. If you can't see success and you've been dieting or you've been trying to reverse, there's something going on with your hormones, your adrenals, your gut, you name it. And you got it, or your thyroid, you got to dig deeper.
Right, so basically digging deeper at that point. Now, I would imagine probably at that point too, maybe backing off, like, again, finding some things from like a stress management standpoint, or again, just backing off of the overall like stress load that you're
Mhm.
placing on your body rather than like, hey, I'm not losing weight. Let's just keep hammering away here at it. Will be super important there. Cool. So I know like in your video, and we've hit on this at least a couple times here, what would you like, obviously, okay, somebody's at the state, like we talked about, things aren't moving. They know they have some hormonal imbalances. And again, maybe it's not necessarily taking a bunch of supplements right away. And you mentioned this in that video, but like, what do you think is like the most underrated thing to work on at this point in time? If you were good.
Stress, 100%. Figuring out how can you be a kind person to yourself is one of the most important things that you could do to support your hormones. And then the gut, 100%. Making sure that stress and your gut are 100% taken care of. That's the first step of approach that you should do. I would actually rather if somebody has hormone issues, I would rather have them go do a gut test first prior to doing something like a Dutch, because most likely the root cause is coming from either your adrenals or your gut.
And so, when you say like stress, what are some like kind of good stress management techniques, right? Because I think people hear that and maybe get confused at like what they need to do, right? I think again, they think, okay, I just need to like not get worked up over things. But like, what are some things that you like, some maybe practical things from a stress management technique standpoint?
My favorite is grounding, being in nature, putting your feet to the floor. So for me, I'm lucky I have the beach, but that could be in grass. It actually can be concrete as well. So I absolutely love grounding, deep belly breathing. So putting your body into a parasympathetic state. One of my favorites is box breathing. So I'll do that, or I'll do deep belly breathing while I do prayer as well. And then being with pets or good friends is also a way to support your parasympathetic nervous system and put your mind into, hey, like a loving type of environment. Those are the top things. And there are also things that you could do like red light therapy, heart math, acupuncture. Those are all things that you could also do as well. Or
basically,
if you just like reading, right? If you just like reading, watching a funny show, sometimes those are things that can be very relaxing and put you into a parasympathetic state as well.
yeah, just something that, like you said, just gets you out of your head, and again, you're not stressing about all the things you need to do. I think, a mistake people make here is they do kind of rely on, like, exercise as a way to, like, "Hey, that's kind of my stress reliever," and
Get
again, that can be something that probably, if you're in this state, again, could lead to, like, a vicious cycle
it.
here with this. What are your thoughts on, like, a periodized approach to nutrition? Like, again, we kinda talked about reverse dieting, we kinda talked about, being in a fat loss phase. Are you a proponent of, like, working in a periodized approach here? Do you think that's something that can kinda help with this? Like, again, if you do that, do you think that will make it less likely that you run into some of these hormonal issues, or what are your thoughts on that?
Really depends on the person and their goals. So, say you're a competitor, yes, 100% a periodized approach. You don't want always to be in a caloric deficit. And then at the same time, you don't always want to be in a caloric surplus. So, for me, if we're talking about like different phases of periodization for nutrition, yes, unless you're just keeping to a maintenance. I feel like people can stick to a maintenance and not cause them any issues. But if you want to build muscle, you want to lose weight, dipping back and forth into going from building muscle to maintenance or building muscle to dieting, it actually helps your hormones because we don't want to be in a chronic surplus. We don't want to be in a chronic deficit. So making sure that you do these different, like you adapt to that's important. And also going away from periods of tracking your calories and your food is also so important. So that's another periodization technique I'm a big fan of because that's another stressor to yourself and to your body. Even if you say tracking helps me not be stressed, I don't care. It does. It stresses you out. Take breaks, please, Lord. Sorry.
No, you're good. No, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's important too, right? I think people think they get into tracking and it's like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to do that forever," but it's like you can take periods of time
Mhm.
where you don't do that. And like you said, that's just another added stressor to
Yes.
to the equation there. So again, even and it like you said, at one point, like a lot of times people don't. I think they probably get accustomed to certain stress levels, so it's like it's not even a stressor, but or you don't feel like it is. You're not
Mhm.
perceiving it as, but it is. So no,
Same for a TV show. I wanna throw that out there. Some people will watch TV, and it'll be a TV show that's actually kind of like an action or maybe like a horror or something. Like, what is that Her or Him? What is that one with the guy that's, like, really creepy?
not
You know what
sure.
I'm talking about?
No,
I don't
sorry.
know. What's the name of it? But anyways, the TV in itself or a stressful book that you're reading, that in itself can be a stressor. And what you listen to too. If you're listening to negative music, that's a stressor.
Yeah, so really again diving deeper and seeing if you are, doing any of those things
Mhm.
can be helpful there. So we hit on like you hit on your like training aspect of it, but what would you say are some things that maybe would be helpful from like a training standpoint? And again, I'm sure it's going to be very dependent on like the person and their exact symptoms,
Mhm.
but like what would you say is a safe kind of approach here with this from a training standpoint?
Are we talking about men or female?
You can do female.
Okay, okay. Because I would say, like, men can handle a lot more training intensity and volume overall, even though they say women can handle more volume, men can tend to be able to handle more because you don't have progesterone to have to deal with. But for females, I like to say, like, really listening to your body and seeing how your body responds to higher intensity type of training. Like, when I'm saying intensity, I don't mean cardio intensity, I mean workout intensity in regards to the volume of your lifts and the heaviness. But I'm a big fan of saying 5 times a week is a good range. Don't completely go to failure every set, leave reps in the tank if you can, 1 to 2, and then periodize your training too. So go through periods of training till failure, and then go through periods of deloads, and then go through periods of just muscle maintenance. Periodizing your training helps to prevent burnout, but it also makes sure that you're rock and roll in the right direction towards your progress.
Awesome.
The
Yeah,
key
no,
thing is listening to your body. It really
yep.
is.
No, I love that, and I like that. I like the periodized approach to it rather than like, hey, always pushing hard. Again, same thing with the tracking. Dial back during periods of time, like you said, listen to your body on that. So we're coming to the end here. Was there anything that maybe we missed? And then is there a couple maybe main takeaways for the audience here to take away from this?
Main takeaway I would say would be to really look at the internal, like I mentioned, the internal and external stressors that could be involved with your hormones or impacting your hormones. And whenever you're going through a stressful situation or whenever you feel like your hormones are going off the deep end, the first thing that you want to question is, what can I control? Don't focus on what you can't control in the moment. Focus on what you can control, that because that's going to give you more stress resiliency. And then my big I would definitely really focus on staying hydrated and then making sure that you're getting good sleep because those are the top 2 things that can really walk you into further issues.
Yeah, the sleep thing's funny, right? Because I feel like it's always at the high. It's like always at the top end of the priority list, but it's like you want to put it a little bit lower because I feel like the moment you start talking about sleep, people just kind of just zone out and start, okay, what's the training thing that I
Mhm.
can do, or what's the supplement I can take? But it is super important. So I'm glad you brought that up. Well, Lacey, it was great chatting with you. I know you talked about your book, so I'm sure if like people want, maybe a little bit more in-depth information on this, your book's probably a great resource to get that information.
Yeah, it's so much more detailed than this podcast got into. I talk about mechanisms and a lot of the different ways that you can actually like support your hormones on a diet, lifestyle, supplementation perspective. Also about how to support your metabolism, all that type of stuff. So if anybody wants to give it, it's The Women's Guide to Hormonal Harmony, and that's on Amazon.
Yeah, also, yeah, a great resource, and like you said, that will dive into it'll be much deeper than what we got into. But the big thing that I wanted people to get was like, hey, your hormones are a sign that like something you're doing is off, right? And so I think if that's a big your takeaways, and then that I think are good things for people to take away, and then to look into this a little bit more. So before I let
One
you go,
thing
is
I'll
there?
mention, one more
Yes.
thing I'll mention. A lot of women, specifically with hormone issues, they're chasing the diagnosis. So they're trying to say, okay, is it PCOS? Is it estrogen dominance? Like, what's going on? Throw out the diagnosis because your body, you're going to want to constantly want that. Instead of chasing the diagnosis, chase getting rid of your symptoms.
No, I love that. I think that's a great advice right there, right? Don't chase the diagnosis, chase the symptoms, and working on that. So
Mm.
cool. Anywhere else where the audience can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Faith and Fit. And then my podcast is Uplift Fit Nutrition.
Awesome. It was great chatting with you, Lacey, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.